this is Mof Khayadi talking. I'm the lead learning facilitator for this program, and I will be giving you some housekeeping notes, and then we will be welcoming our faculty. So this event will be recorded, and it's preferably if everybody is on mute and everybody opens their camera, but if you don't, it's okay. Afterwards, when we are sharing with you the questions, if you see your name and you recognize you have asked that question, please turn on your camera or at least your microphone and freely ask them to our faculty. So today, I'm very excited again to have Professor Alex Pentland from the Institute for Data Systems and Society at the MIT Media Lab. So hello, Professor.
Hello, glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. And another big welcome to our Professor Deborah Ancona, who is the Selly Distinguished Professor of Management and Professor of Organization Studies at MIT Sloan School of Management. Hello, Professor.
Hi, welcome everyone.
So this session will follow a Q&A format, and thank you to those who submitted questions in advance. I will share a slide deck shortly. But once the question is read, I will turn off the sharing screen so you can interact directly with the professors. Like I said, if you see your question popping up, please feel free to ask it. And during this event, if you have a spontaneous question, you can also put it in the chat, and me and Kathy will try to organize and give the word to everybody. So let's start. I'll share my screen with you. Share. So I think you can see the question, right?
Yep.
Excellent. So we're gonna start by Manuel. So Manuel, if you are with us today, please feel free to open your camera and mic, or at least your mic, and ask your question. So Kathy, I think Manuel is not with us.
Yeah, I just searched. I don't think I see him here. So if you'd like to ask the question,
yeah,
read the question.
Sure.
Great.
Sure. And please, professors, I will give the freedom to you to choose which one of you want to answer that question.
I don't mind going first for this one.
Okay, so
yeah.
I'll read it out loud. So Manuel said, my question would be about what to do when approaching the organizational change towards a more nimble organization and the use of AI when the company has many products, lines, or products platforms evolving at a different speed. Would it be easier to limit the transformation program, at least initially, to those units with products presenting higher disruption? Or should we attempt a complete organizational renewal across the business lines in preparation of whatever happen in the future? And he, of course, is thanking you for answering his question in advance. And what are your thoughts about it and concerns? The floor is yours.
Yeah, my sort of approach towards this is you want to pick the safest, easiest thing first. So something where there's a clear value add for doing this. So it's a place where there's really a pain point. Some place that is not something that is necessarily presenting higher disruption, but something where the organization can be very supportive and communicates well within itself so that you can all get together and do this. Because a lot of things that go wrong is people don't understand what's supposed to happen. They're scared about it. They have poor communications. So you want to introduce something that is not very novel in a place that's working really well so that you can have the whole team do a good job at it. And one of the roles there is not to have this huge win, but to have the organization learn what this is all about and to have a clear success so that you can point to other people and say, see, clear success, we did it, now you can try it too. So start modest, start small, start places where, the team is really working well so that you can get through the inevitable problems and misunderstandings would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Professor Sandy. Professor Deborah, if you want to add something.
Sure. So I would totally agree with Sandy that you want to start small. And I would even say you can start very small, that the move to Nimble or using X Teams, you guys could go back to your companies tomorrow and just sort of say, okay, let's say we want to be more externally oriented. Next week at your meeting, assign everybody in your team to go meet with one customer or go look at one AI application and report back. And then the whole team then grows in the area of knowledge. So it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It could start really small as you start working in new ways and learning new things. That's the key, is to create a more distributed system while also creating a learning culture. And that can start very small. Then once you decide, okay, well, let's try this or let's try that, then you run those experiments as Sandy said, and see what happens and see how it goes. You at a lower level of the firm aren't going to be able to come in unless you have a lot of influence to change the entire organization and the entire culture. For that, you really do need to have a whole campaign of change and get people on board from on high. You can try to convince someone higher in the organization to support a broader change, but the best way to do that is to have started small, to have some results, to build the momentum, to have the data that says, when we do this, this is what happens, and then you're more apt to create the momentum for a larger change. That said, if you've got a lot of different kinds of organizational units, for whatever reason, they're growing at different rates or they're looking at different markets or whatever, it might not be that the whole organization moves in the same way. Then you determine what is it that's changing across the entire organization and what is it that needs to be specifically fit to a particular unit, because not all units necessarily are the same. So anyway, just to kind of add on to what Sandy said, start small, build it up, and then decide what the whole game board might look like.
So another thing, like when I was chair of AT&T's data board, so looking at this, one of the things we did for a couple of years is do internal processes only. So things that were not customer facing, where they were things that had very clear performance metrics like saving money, consistency of function, things like that. So existing processes that aren't working really well, everybody knows they're not working really well. Maybe they're expensive or they break all the time. And if you can do something with that, then you get a clear win. There isn't the sort of frantic, we're alienating the customers, we'll be liable, because it's all internal. And that's actually a nice thing. And you have KPIs for it. So when it goes to go up the ladder and convince people to do more things, you can say, hey, we did this, it took this long, it generates this much savings. That's the sort of story you want to be able to tell.
Excellent. Thank you, professors, for both of your input. I want to say that this session is recorded. So if somebody from your group or your teammate is not present with us, he can just view it again. It's going to be posted by Kathy on Town Square as usual. And let's move on to the second question. And to keep it more interactive, we have a live question from Sambit. So thank you, Sambit, for it. And it says, oh, actually, Sambit, if you can ask your own question by yourself. Excellent. Go ahead.
Hi, Mofek. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, it's Mofek. Yeah.
So my question is that I'm also doing a course with the public policy and AI implementation in public policy. Now, one of the reasons why I'm asking that question, because public policy means there are a lot of stakeholders which are public, this public money involved, right? So now there's a question of ethics and dilemma and all those things comes in with the implementation of AI policy. And now the decision maker, how does AI can help let's say a administrator who has to take an everyday decision in terms of getting data and collecting data and analyzing and so critical thinking. How does AI will help critical thinking while making a decision in terms of public policy decision? That's in future. Now, how does our esteemed professor, see that in future happening?
Well, I think
So that's
later
my
in the
question.
course, we're going to get into this. And, there's a whole sort of process that you want to think about. Imagine that you were going to just forget AI for the moment. You're going to spend some money. You're going to put up a new policy. What would you do? Well, you'd write down, here's what we want to achieve. Here's what we anticipate the cost. Here's the stakeholders. Here's what we think the stakeholders will do. Just, like a proposal of where to do it. And often people launch into these AI things without doing that. And then they also don't monitor what the thing actually does when it's released. So that it's like saying, we're going to spend money, but we're not going to take track of where it is. We're not going to audit it or keep books. It's sort of crazy. Again, like for instance, I was just talking with a student of mine who's helping governments throughout Latin America monitor their social programs. And actually what he's done is build an AI tool that helps them simulate what different policies would do. So it's a design tool. The humans, the policymakers, still make the decisions, but the AI helps them visualize it and set the parameters. And that sort of human-centered thing, where it's still humans, in control, is a great way to start, particularly for sensitive things like public policy.
Regarding that thing, I mean, there are like a couple of segments where AI, a tool like AI or any other design tools can help us in public policy. I was just about to decision-making process. Another one is operational process. Anyway, so if you don't want me to ask this question, I can just move on to another question.
Well, later in the course, maybe, yeah?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, feel free, but I think you have, your voice was froze like for a little bit. So if you can briefly re-ask your question,
No, so no, I was just restructuring my question, the previous question that I asked. So I was, so decision, implementation process in both places, AI can help. So anyway, so professor has answered that question convincingly for now.
Okay, excellent. So I think we can move on to the next question. I'll be sharing my screen again with you. And here we go. So Majid, if you are with us, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, I think he's not with us, so I'll be reading it out loud. It's about AI implementation. It says, recently, many business models and startup companies based on crowd models, for example, crowdfund, and another example is the collection or labeling large amount of data that is used to feed artificial intelligence and machine learning model. Majid's question is, what are the best ways and methods that can benefit from these leadership models? He's referring to module 2 content in managing such businesses. So professors, again, the floor is yours.
So I think that maybe Sandy can speak to the crowding modules and crowdfund, et cetera. I would just say that from module 2, where there are startup companies. Startup companies are usually already nimble, already using X teams. That's what they have to do to engage and get funded and get started. The issue comes when these organizations start to grow. In fact, I was just doing a big program with a number of medium-sized companies, and it's those companies that begin to even early on solidify their processes, become more internally oriented, not use technologies in the same way. It's almost like they start, if they're successful, they clamp down and become more bureaucratic, also due to growth. So I would say that you have to keep those nimble X-team processes moving even as you grow and even as you get larger. But Sandy, I'll leave it to you to talk to the technology side of that.
So, the types of places where crowdsourcing is useful is where this is something that everybody in the whole world does the same way. Like, does this picture have a bus in it or not, right? There's not really much ambiguity about that to humans, regardless of who they are. On the other hand, if you have something that is more subjective, like, is this attractive? Is this something that people will be interested in? Is this ethical? Different types of people have different opinions. And crowdfunding tends to reach only people who are fairly, minimally technically literate, tends to be younger, tend to be more Western, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you aren't getting a good sample, and that can lead you badly astray. And so you need to be very aware of that. There are crowdsourcing platforms that are demographically balanced. So what they do is they work really, really hard to get a good sampling by, say, all geographies or all ages or something like that. So you can mitigate some of that risk. Those platforms are, of course, a little more expensive because they have to work harder to find the right people. Those are sort of very simple types of crowdsourcing things. They're very utility practically. It's like getting your plumbing, fixed. You can spin it up, do something, have the answer back in, a week at the most, sometimes even a day. More interesting, but also much more difficult to do are things like prediction markets, which are internal markets or markets to predict outcomes. And they have shown some promise, but they're easy to go wrong. So these are like future markets in the stock exchange. And they're actually not bad, but you have to be really careful about the incentives and the demographics and the questions. So that's a much more sophisticated thing to actually manage and set up. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Like my students do crowdfunding sourcing for answers all the time. And they can get a couple thousand people to answer questions in a nice balanced experiment in under a week, no problem, right? For $1,000 or a couple $1,000. And so, yeah, this is just a utility now. But you have to be careful to be sure you have the right people answering the right question. So that becomes the skill that's needed there.
Thank you, Professor. I think Majid will be happy with your answer when he watched the recorded session. And now we're gonna move on to Lalit. If you can hear me, you can unmute yourself. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you said my name correctly. I have two questions though. One is generic in nature. One is about, can AI be used by political leaders or leadership of countries for in their national security decision-making process in predicting how a country would behave or how the head of the state would behave in certain situations like a disaster? or Ukrainian situations, that will help those leaders of those countries to not only secure their own people or territorial integrity, but also aim towards making a world a more peaceful place to live in for the humanity.
Well, we do a fair amount of this stuff. You can't predict individual leaders because you don't have enough data, you don't have their mindset changes, etc. But you can predict things like, you know, if there's a typhoon, what communities will be hit? Because that's physical simulation combined with understanding of the, you know, where people live and what sort of housing they have. So you can do a fair amount of prediction of things. So like, for instance, economics usually predicts what will happen if you check this policy versus that policy. And, you know, it has a somewhat spotty record of accuracy, but it helps. It helps you understand when there's things you shouldn't do and things that you look like they'll be okay. And the same thing is true for these sorts of things in other policies. Like, for instance, if countries were aware, more aware of where their food comes from, they would recognize that having half of your calories come from the Ukraine and Russia was probably not such a safe idea. And there'll be a lot of pain that comes because people didn't recognize that. And so, yeah, clearly you can make a better world by using tools to be able to anticipate results and therefore choose policy. But the choice of policy in the end has to be something that people do with discussion with the stakeholders. Nobody's really just going to trust a machine to do this at this sort of point, and that's probably good.
Yeah, true. But you know, in a democratic country like US or India, where every lawmakers, every speech, every voting pattern, every election schedule is being monitored and accounted for, right? Everything is done, everything is documented, right? For instance, President Biden here and Prime Minister Modi in India, since they enter their public life, everything, almost everything is documented. Why can't there be some kind of predictions on their policy wise, or how they would? I can understand if there's something comes from a Chinese leader or a North Korean leader, it might be difficult. But here in the US, India, it could be possible, right? Or you think we haven't reached that stage yet?
If you look at, for instance, polling predictions, voting predictions, yeah, they're not too bad, but sometimes they're wildly wrong. Okay, so that tells you the state of the art in this sort of accuracy prediction AI. Yeah, you can look at all those records and predict who's likely to win the election, but it doesn't always work, right? Because you didn't sample the right people, you didn't ask the right questions, they didn't give you answers that you thought you were getting, and so forth. And a lot of that just comes down to not having enough of the right data. And it's very, very difficult to do this because the world's really complicated. And so you can't have all of the questions and all of the data. And a lot of it's private and not digital. So it's very difficult to know that. On the other hand, you can have simulations. Like, for instance, in the United States, every bill that's proposed is supposed to be vetted through the Office of Budget Management to look at the cost of that actual bill. So before they vote on it, they're supposed to say, there's supposed to be an answer from economists that, oh, this will cost $10 billion, or this will generate money, or whatever. And sometimes those predictions are wrong, but at least they're useful to help people and guide people in making decisions. So someday you could have maybe better prediction of elections and things like that. But again, there's just so many variables that go into people's decisions that you can't measure them all, not as a practical sort of human life type of a thing.
Thank you. My second question is the profession I come from, which is journalism. You know, this is being this major challenge the profession is facing and the industry is facing is the fake news and the real news, right? I'm working on some through my startup. I'm working on some of addressing some of the issues. But can you tell us how AI can be helpful in both bringing together AI and human intelligence, which you call as collective intelligence right now, can be used to address this fake news questions?
Can I just I just want to come in and add to what Sandy said before, and that is, no matter, not to your second question, but no matter what the AI system is, you also have to have good data. I mean, the system is only as good as the data that you provide to it. And I think in terms of prediction of elections, part of the issue, at least in the United States, has been that, they haven't been able to get at what people's real intentions are. So you can ask them, but if one group responds more than the second group, then they're overrepresented in the sample and you might get really, really aberrant results. So you have to have the human intelligence there to be assessing, is our data good enough or is it not good enough? And if it's not, then you have to kind of go in and do some of your own, even non-quantitative work to get a sense of what the bias is. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
So on the second question, I mean, where AI is being used is to identify, robots, bots, or troll farms, so groups of people that are pushing a dialogue. It's been much less successful in identifying fake news because, first of all, what's people call fake is turns out to be subjective. A lot of it is, oh, this person intended that, and did this. Well, the did this might be true, but the intention is a very delicate inference, and it's hard to know what people are thinking. And so a lot of the fake news is a story about what somebody is thinking. And one side of an issue sees the story as true, the other side sees it as false. And that changes over time too, as you get more data. So it's not a simple problem of, oh, it's true or false. You can do some of the true or false about facts, was there an explosion at this point and at this time? Yeah, that's pretty good to determine whether it's true or not. You may not have the data, but then the story you tell about it, oh, it was terrorists. Oh, no, it was a gas line. That story is very hard to verify. And I actually think that probably the way people are going about it is really wrong. And you can see that by the fact that, for instance, fact checkers don't agree with each other about what's true and what's false. Even if they're all on the same side of the political spectrum, they don't agree with each other very much. So what's the truth? It's hard to know when you get to the area of what people are thinking or what they're intending. If you restrict yourself to physical facts, then it's much easier to do that. But I think the really big thing is these troll farms and the bot farms. And you see this in many places. It's a small group of people that have lots of robots on the web, and they generate enormous amounts of strong opinion, a lot of which is very unsupported.
So thank you, professors, for your input. Now we're going to go back to the slide and the questions that have been posted last week. We're going to give priority to those learners. So here we go, sharing again. Oops. No, that's my other word.
That's cool.
What is the slide? Oh, it's in here. So we have a question from Sanjita. Maybe Sangita. I'm horrible with names, sorry. Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
my question is more about implementation. And the question says that when we talk of federated AI and data analytics allow one to use statistics about data instead of owning data, that means you have to source it from departments, whether internally or externally. This would, according to me, this statistics is not simple and would require to build capabilities. That means you have to build distributed capabilities also. Will it not be challenged? Will such thing not hinder AI implementation?
The answer is it's not also, it's instead of. And federated AI is often dramatically easier to implement. And the reason is you don't have to own the data. You don't have to put it all in the same model. You know, when you look at people implementing these AI things, 80% of the cost is getting data into a uniform place with a uniform model and being clean, by which they mean consistent. Well, you can get rid of that 80% of the cost by using a federated model, okay? It's a different way of thinking about AI. It's not completely alien, and there's lots of open source tools for it. But what it lets you do is query databases rather than own databases, okay? Now you do this in many places where you know, already, if you think about marketing, you don't actually, you know, if you're an international organization, you have lots and lots of cities that you operate. They all have different statistics. You don't need every single sale from every single city. What you need is you need the statistics from the cities to say, oh, it's doing better over there, it's doing worse here, and you can correlate that with, oh, well, this is a richer city, and it's selling better. And in fact, actually, we see that the richer the city, the more the sales. Ah, okay. That, what you just did, what I just said, is an example of federated AI. It's not, this is not like completely alien at all. But what you find a lot of AI implementations doing is saying, oh, well, the first thing is we have to get a record of every single sale from every single city and stick it in some big cloud someplace. And then, well, you've already done something that A, you don't have to do, and is very hard and expensive. And there was this much simpler thing you could do, which is fit for purpose. Not every question fits in that federated idea, but a lot of them do, and there's increasingly good open source tools and products that let you do that. And the fact that you don't have to make a new data store to do this, that you don't have to have a uniform model, is dramatically cheaper and easier. Some of the things to look up are things like that are called not just federated learning, but data fabrics. So data fabrics are a way of sharing data inside an organization without having a data lake. So you don't have that cost of setting up a data lake, nor do you have the risk of setting up a data lake. Right? You put this. What it is it's a communication network between your existing databases. And so that's another type of product to sort of look up as a way of avoiding the cost and the problems of creating a data lake.
Thank you.
Sure.
The second question is, how are nimble organizations different from agile organizations?
Yeah, actually, there were a lot of questions that came about this agile nimble. And I think part of the issue is that these terms are used so differently by so many different people that saying what's different from what means you have to first articulate what each one of them is. So I would like to differentiate nimble and agile organizations from the use of nimble and agile techniques. So a lot of the agile techniques that people talked about in the questions, like Scrum or whatever, those are most often used to if you're doing a particular product or you're trying to improve a particular process. So it's a kind of a narrow application of tools that enable you to be leaner and more efficient and get customer input and have fast turnaround. Those ideas are absolutely pivotal to both agile and nimble organizations, but those forms of agile are more narrowly applied. And don't have to do with the entire organization. Nimble and agile organizations are very similar. They are trying to articulate and explain and create organizations that are more adaptive to this exponentially changing world. So people talk about nimble organizations. McKinsey does a lot on agile. They kind of own the agile organization realm, as it were, and label. Also learning organizations, networked organizations. It's all about these new forms that are evolving in order to enable organizations to be more agile or nimble in the face of uncertainty and new technologies and so on. They use a lot of the same ideas that come from the narrowly defined kind of agile world. But if you want to make an organizational change and change the organization, you also have to change the entire organizational culture or unit or team, whatever, the whole culture, the way in which the firm is organized. So it's a much bigger ask to move your organization in this kind of way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Now let's move on to the next question. So Mohammed, I think I've seen you with us today. Maybe I'm wrong. So I'll ask the question. It's about nimble organizations. The question is, as more big corporations are switching to more nimble models, how much of an impact that would be on the success or failure of small startups? Is a monopoly from big companies going to be more dominant then, or new ideas and innovations?
Yeah, I don't think that even as large organizations become more nimble and more agile, they're going to replace startups. Startups often are just better at coming in with a new technological idea. They're not encumbered. You have bureaucracy, even if you're more nimble, they're not encumbered by that. They are still able to come in with new ideas and new ways of doing things. And so I don't think that just because larger organizations are becoming more nimble, that's going to mean the death toll of startups. Startups are another form of innovation. And in fact, part of the role of nimble organizations is not just to organically change their organizations, but also to bring in new technologies from startups as another mechanism to become more nimble and more agile in the world. So as organizations become more nimble, there's going to be more of a need. There's going to be more of a need for these ideas that are coming in from these startups that are basically running those experiments that Sandy was talking about. It's just that they're running them outside the firm instead of inside the firm. So I think the growth will help spur, in fact, both forms of organizations. I don't see the large taking over the small.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Still have hope.
Nimble in a large organization means not dead. It doesn't mean anything like competitive with a startup. So yeah.
Maybe Mohammed, you have the question that you have asked me. It's a bit technical, but
Yes.
professors can give you an input on that too.
Actually, whatever you sent me, that's good. I'm gonna just take a day to look at the
Yeah. Yeah.
And I probably need to talk with my team what the most technology that we could use out of the suggestions. But I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll
Okay.
respond to you tomorrow.
Yeah, take your time. It took me a while like to research. So Muhammad had an interesting question. He's combining a lot of different technologies, AR, VR, and AI into a startup. And it was a good conversation. So for me, sometimes I do not have the exact answer. And it's an invitation for all the learners like to DM me or on Town Square, like to give us a spark about cutting edge technology, and we have that conversation about.
Yeah, maybe
So
we
thank
could
you.
put the links. Maybe we could put the links on Times Square and see what feedback we could get if you want.
Okay, for sure. If you allow it, I will. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, no problem.
Okay.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
My pleasure. So let's move on to the next question. Is from Shavani. Are you with us today? I'll start
Yes, I'm
read.
here.
Oh, excellent. Go ahead, please.
So with mid or large companies, they're normally plagued with legacy, non-integrated systems, processes, data, and the technology and change investment required to implement a nimble organization may be quite a large undertaking. Can the panel share the experiences on how best such an organization can quickly and cost effectively plan and execute a migration to being more nimble, and how you can actually go about to evaluating the associated return on investment of migrating to nimble? And I guess, going nimble is probably quite a key thing for organizations in highly disruptive tech sectors where there's always new ideas coming forward, and therefore you have to be nimble. But what about, a cost benefit proposal for perhaps organizations more in the arts or, not so much in the highly disruptive tech sectors? How can they justify the cost of going to a nimble organization?
So I'll take the first take on that. This is a big question. It's a good question, and a couple of answers to that. First of all, what Sandy and I have been saying all along is you don't want to necessarily make this huge investment until you start small and show proof of concept and gather the data that you will need in order to get the ROI estimates that you may want. It's not going to come from huge established studies. So the idea is start small and then see where that goes. Or, if you have an enlightened leader, so Satya Nadella, really came in and transformed Microsoft. It has been a big investment. It's taken a long time. The financial results have been unbelievable. But yes, that is a very large change. And unless you have a lot of people on the top committed to doing it, it's probably not going to happen. That said, there are a lot of CEOs who are changing and moving. ING Bank, Fidelity Investments have all made big investments with, in their case, BCG, to move to more team-based, nimble organizational forms. So it can be done, and it can be done in a clear process. But again, if you want to unfreeze the system and make people even open to the idea, you need to start small and show proof of concept. Show we did this. So for example, I've been doing work with a very, very backward pharmaceutical company. They just have 2 X teams that they put in, and I call them the kind of Johnny Appleseeds of the company. What they're doing is they've done amazingly well at showing that product development can be shortened, that they can change the way that they source materials, that they can change the way legal contracts are written. So they're experimenting and then bringing these ideas over to seed the rest of the organization with ideas, because they don't have a top down. They're doing it kind of bottom middle across, if you will. And that is one way to kind of get these things started. I don't think, so one of the cases we're rewriting the X Team book, the next edition of the X Team book. And one of the cases I totally love is the Museum of Modern Art. So I wouldn't say that the arts organizations are the ones who can't do this. The Museum of Modern Art has totally redefined art. They haven't looked at trends or whatever, but they used an X Team to rethink both their physical space and what art goes in which rooms. They had people across their organization from different parts, the painting people with the people who do sculpture, talking together about what goes in which rooms and what ways are there to rethink and reimagine the way a museum could be, what art actually is, without having the need for big titles and things that turn people away from art. And they were very agile, very nimble. They looked at what people were looking at, what they paid attention to when they went through the museum. So I think these ideas can be applied in multiple industries. And I think everything's changing right now. You can't say they're the fast moving and they're the non-moving. There are the fast moving and the super fast moving, and others who are redefining what the whole industry could be.
Yeah, and I think that's the primary message that's in answer to that. But one of the things is not locking yourself into very rigid AI data structures. And again, this is where things like data fabrics, not having data lakes, we're trying to do federated AI sort of as the mindset, means you can move faster. Because instead of trying to do this big, we're going to reorganize all of the IT departments and data processes, what you're doing is you're asking where can they work together? So that when one of Deb's X teams says, oh, can we combine this and this to get that? The answer is, oh yeah, that shouldn't be hard. As opposed to, oh, well, that's a 3-year, $10 million investment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So one of the companies I work with is exactly that. They don't even have a central data of anything. It's all spread in 5 or 6 different areas in the business. And even for,
in a way that's
reporting,
good,
they don't have anything central.
Yeah, because they don't have to fight the central battle as much.
Yeah.
But they do need to allow these different data silos and different groups to talk to each other, both for ideas, but also to share insights and collaborate on new things that are across silo.
Yeah, super.
Thank you, professors, for your answers. And let's move on to the last question on the slide deck. And after that, if we have like a couple of minutes, we will take a question from the chat. But I think it's only 9 minutes left. So last question for Margaret. I think she's with us.
Yes, good morning, everybody. And this also connects to what I put in the chat, just as a general reaction about trends that you're seeing with these always on HRIS platforms, the listening platforms, and just the trend towards productization, and just, what the two of you are seeing, and any cautions or interesting insights around those.
So I can't say I have a fully fledged answer to this question, because everything is evolving at the moment. We are just in a stage of evolution and trying out different modes of change and so on and so forth. So I think that part of what people are trying to do is get a better sense of where employees are in terms of their willingness to be hybrid, to work across boundaries. There's also just a lot of work in change management about thinking about what are the best ways to engage in this hybrid way. Hybrid meaning both co-located and working virtually, as well as the idea that it's hybrid in terms of people and technology or people and machines. Those are new formats that we're really trying to look at. And one of the, I think, interesting things that I think a part of this course is the idea of pulsing, of changes. You bring people together, figure out, collect your data, do what it is you want to do, and then let people go out to do whatever else they need to do, then in and out. There's this pulsing of people together and then move to individual work, people together and move to individual work, and using that kind of pulse system or mode of both working and changing is part of the way people are thinking about this. But there is also, as we've said throughout, this is a period of experimentation. And so where we get from that experimentation, I think, is not yet clear.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, one of the things is that people are still exploring what sort of tools and general like physical arrangement makes the most sense. Like for instance, some companies are looking at having local work areas so that you don't commute in, but you do get out of the house. So cheaper real estate out near the edge of the city, not organized by department, but across the whole company. And that has the advantage that the commute is less. Some people feel very comfortable about that because they feel like they need to get out of the house some. And it has the fact that it's not organized the way companies are usually organized, which is people of the same department sit together, means that there's more communication across departments. And so that's one thing people are experimenting with digital tools. Companies are looking at many different sorts of digital tools. A lot of tools like this one can be used in lots of different ways. So for instance, I've seen groups that just keep a video feed on all the time. And it's not that they're supposed to have conversations. It's like having a desk in the same large room. So I can see that Deb is there, and if she is, I can say, hey, Deb, could you answer this real quick? But there's no presumption that we're in a meeting. It's not a meeting. It's just sort of being in the same room. So people are experimenting with those sorts of options with digital technology. There's still the battle of Slack versus email versus all going on. And it's hard to know where things will land.
The other thing I'd say about change is that as people go out, one of the real issues is building culture and building shared ability to collaborate. And so a lot of the work being done on change is how do we do this? We create more hackathons where people can work together, kind of following up on Sandy's idea of collaboration from different departments so that you're building those networks and the ties that you need in order to get the work done within the organization so people know who they are. So again, it's this intense kind of thing. Or my son works at a company where everybody's kind of remote, but what they do is they take them on these really amazing vacations so that, again, people are working together and trying new things together. So I think we're, again, experimenting with that as a way to match cultural change and the building of networking to the pace of change with the digitization and the remote work.
So thank you, professors, for all your valuable inputs. And to wrap up today's session, I want to thank all the learners and the success team that made this happen. And the wrap up, I will give you the closing thoughts and remarks that you want to share with the learners.
Well, I think that the theme here is start small, start internal, educate yourself, try and focus on the culture change that needs to happen to support this digitization AI process rather than the particular thing. But the particular thing then is the example you use to sell it more broadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just iterate on that, that start small. I also think the rationale for this course, why do we have leadership and AI together, is because either one alone is not going to get you where you want to go. So you have to think, what technologies do I want to use, and how do we have the leadership to get them implemented, and how do they grow together? How can they be integrated in an effective way? And that requires you to have these dual ways of thinking, which is both organizational, cultural, structural, relational, as well as the technology and where it's going and how it can best be used. You want to think about leadership and how do you bring in the best technologies and how do you implement them in your companies. So I just want to underline that theme, that these two systems, the human and the technical, have to work in concert with one another. And that's the kind of mindset that we're hoping to leave you all with at the end of this course.
So everybody, with those closing thoughts from our great professors, our session for today have ended. So I wish you good luck for the rest of the program and have a great rest of the week. Goodbye, everyone.
I would just
please,
also,
Professor, please.
I would just like to also thank, it's not just us, it's you and all of the support staff who really make this happen and who offer the glue and the behind the scenes work that makes this whole thing work together. So thanks both to students and staff and facilitators for creating a system of people who are learning together. So.
Thank you, Professor.